Wednesday, so you've had a few days to kind of process everything. How do you think the project management plan went? Like, are you happy with everything? Do you think there's anything that you were missing now that you've had a few days to stew on it? What are your thoughts? And again, this isn't like a gotcha moment. Like, I'm not like, fishing for like some big thing. I'm just giving you a chance to kind of reflect before I let you know what I thought.
I think it was good.
Yeah? Duran, Joy?
Yeah, I think it went really well.
Yeah? Okay, good, yeah. I won't keep you in suspense. I thought you did really well too. There were a lot of things I was really pleased with. A lot of things I thought you did really well with this management plan. The primary and secondary sources. I thought that petition that you found was great. I thought that a lot of the primary sources that you found really kind of spoke to like the nature of like Dundas. I thought you did a good job of finding, I think, primary sources that said this guy is amazing, and then like, oh, he's a monster. So like you kind of did a good job of kind of showing both sides of that coin, like the controversy of why like they would honor like streets and towns after this guy, but then also why today we're like maybe not. So I thought you did a good job of just finding sources to kind of fill out this like who Dundas was, to really kind of speak to like his life and his character. I thought that was great. That said, I thought there were some chances for like elaboration. And this is something that you might have already maybe like answered in your research, but I thought there were some points where you could kind of dive in a little bit deeper and just kind of show the reader in this rough draft project, like, or the viewer, like, kind of explain things a little bit more. So for instance, like one of the sources you talked about, or that you noted, said that basically Dundas is responsible for keeping 633,000 people enslaved in Canada. So like, where did that number come from? Is that number like accurate? Just kind of, I think, talking about like slavery in Canada a bit, I think would kind of help round out the story. Because essentially, like Dundas, like his controversy is that he really put the brakes on emancipation, right? Right, like that's the controversial aspect of his past. So like, where does this number come from? Right, 630,000. And just in general, like how widespread was slavery in Canada, and like, is he the only person who shared these views in Canada? So just like some context around like slavery in the early 1800s in Canada, I think would help kind of round out your sort of like sources, right? Just kind of give a little bit more perspective there. So maybe just like a little more research to find one or two things to kind of fill that out. Let's see. So in general, I think the sources you found were great. Just a little bit more digging. The other thing that I kind of noted was the issue with the digital history tool. As it is, like, I think it was a little bit tough for me to really get a sense for what you were thinking in terms of using kind of a platform. So could you just maybe walk me through like what you're thinking with that? With what kind of tool you're thinking, or what you're, just in general, like what you're planning on doing? Because I was a little bit confused there. Like, how are you, maybe I'll take a step back. Like, in general, like, how are you thinking about presenting this information that you found to the viewer, the reader? Like, not even like a program, just like in general, like what are you kind of thinking?
Well, I think we were thinking about okay.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead, Duran. Go ahead. You got the floor. Go for it.
Okay, so maybe it's just me, but I envisioned it as a timeline. You can be more detailed. You would have like pictures and just text, kind of like that. And then when it comes to actual data, we would have a visual tool that would have graphs and stuff. I don't know if that's viable.
Sorry, you cut out at the key moment there. Can you say that again? So a timeline that users can kind of like click through, and then what else?
Data visualization. So it's kind of like it would create graphs and charts for just like.
Okay. Okay, Michaela, you wanna add on that, or is that where you were at, or?
Yeah, basically kind of the same thing. I think like in terms of like that sort of like part of the project, like I have like a vague-ish idea of like what we're aiming for, but like personally in terms of like how I work, like that will kind of come like with looking at a program and then just seeing how that formats, but like yeah, like a timeline or like diagram sort of thing.
Okay. What do you mean by like a diagram? Like an actual like pie chart kind of thing, or something like different? Like I'm just confused on like the terminology, I guess.
Like I guess like a table with like sections that you can like click, and then they have more like detailed links or videos or sort of things, like a Prezi sort of vibe, I guess.
Okay. Gotcha. So not necessarily like an actual like chart with like lines and graphs, but something more like visual, where you kind of like lead the viewer through these like different elements of your presentation. Okay, gotcha. And maybe putting it like chronologically, or maybe just kind of like having just like sections. Okay, that helps kind of clarify where I'm at. Joy, anything you want to add to that?
For maybe like I think I agree with the drawing. We can use like the time, but also in the same time like seeing the. I don't know. Is it possible to calculate as a population? Does makes like see how much people like come and go to slavery in the moment. So yeah.
Sorry, can you explain that again?
So like, in that time period, because a lot of people like see black people as like more like a slavery, right?
In the 1800s, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, because from the documents I found, I see like those letters keep saying about like Dundas owned a lot of like black slaves, and it's just like normal to talk about like how many he owes and how many he brought up from the other country. So I think we can use that in part of the chart and see how he was able to gain that much people, and no one really like accused till he got to the court. But even like in the court, he got like just away from it. So I think we can use those chart and say about like compare about this chart into that too, I think.
Yeah, so maybe like just like finding like historical charts that show like the extent of like slavery, and then you kind of talk about Dundas like within that. That makes sense. Okay. So yeah, so I think for me like that was the big challenge I think for your group going forward, is to really kind of nail down a digital tool that you want to use. Michaela, you mentioned Prezi, like that's fine. Timeline.js, that's another. If you want to do like a timeline, like that's fine. I think story map, which we talked about last time. I think all of these are kind of different ways that different programs that you could use to like arrange your material. I think for the most part, I think you found it like good information. I think the big challenge for you going forward will be to select a tool, a platform to use, and then kind of like dive into it. I think that's going to be the most time consuming. Sorry to hear that. That's my kids ringing the doorbell. So yeah, I think that the biggest challenge is going to be just finding a tool that like works for you. Like as it is, I think like in the abstract, you kind of know like what you want to do. But I think what this discussion has shown is like there's a lot of work to do on like the finer points, like how you actually see this laying it out. Like, do you see it like chronologically? Like here's Dundas, and you have like discussion like slavery, and then you kind of like jump forward to today. Could you do it more like thematically with something like Prezi, where it's just like here's Dundas, here's slavery, here's like controversy today. There's a lot of work to do there, and every different tool that you explore kind of has its own advantages and disadvantages, right? Like there's a learning curve for all of these different tools. So I'd really encourage you to like, I don't know if you've used any of these before or not, but I think that'll be the challenge really, is to find a tool that I think can really allow you to have your research show through. Because like I said, I think you found some great sources. And so finding a tool that will allow you to really kind of showcase your research and kind of tell the story of Dundas and this controversy, I think that'll be the challenge for you. And so I'd really encourage you to just like dive in and get going. The rough draft is due the 29th. So that's just over 2 weeks away. And it's going to take, I think, quite a bit of time to not just select a tool, but also then start putting all your information into this rough draft here. Like there's a lot of work to do for this rough draft. And the better you do the rough draft, the less work you have to do for the final draft, right? So I think this is like the critical 2 weeks here. So I'd encourage you to just like jump in, start working on finding a tool, and then just trying to make that tool kind of work and kind of filling in everything. Does that make sense? I think that's kind of where we're at here. I think that's the juncture where we are.
Yeah. I haven't taken a look at what the rough draft like thing is, but like, is it just like a Word doc, or is it like an actual rough draft of like the history tool and like all that stuff?
It is. So what you're submitting is just a Word document, but that Word document, it basically is just like a little 1 paragraph description of your project, and then a link to where I can actually find your project. Like you have to have the project like finished. So if you're using like Prezi, you have to have that Prezi presentation like finished. If you're using like Timeline, whatever, you have to have that timeline like finished. Like I want to see your project, right? So all you're doing is submitting is like a document, but that document tells me how to find your project, right? And then just has like a short little description, right? So the rough draft is a rough draft of your project.
Okay.
Yeah. And so like I said, like the more polished you can make this rough draft, like the better it is, really you're just saving yourself work down the line. Like it's getting to be the business end of the semester here, and everything is coming due. So if you can really put in like a good 2 weeks worth of work here, I think you'll save yourself some headache and some hassle for the final draft, right? Is that clear? That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Duran, Joy, she?
Yep.
Okay. Sure, of course.
Okay, I'm just a little concerned that no, not presentation, too much like a PowerPoint-esque. So just aside from like presenting our information, see that we did.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Oh, sorry. I'm just kind of concerned looking too much like a PowerPoint, because we're only presenting just the text information, right? So just what are some of the other things that would make it not just a PowerPoint?
Yeah, no, good. So good question. So the rough draft, it is like a public history project, right? So you should be thinking about it in those kinds of terms. So like think about the back to unit 3, where you're like finding like public history projects, right? And how they were more or less like comprehensive, right? What I'm not looking for is a PowerPoint, right? Because like PowerPoint, it says like Henry Dundas, and then like there's a bullet point with like the dates he lived, and bullet point that says like slavery question mark. You know, like that's not what I want. Like I want like polished like prose that like lay out, you know, like who Henry Dundas like was, why he's controversial, and like how that's kind of playing out today. So there should be like no like ambiguity, you know, like you should be saying like why he's controversial, not in a bullet point. Like if you want to include like videos and visuals, you need to contextualize those, you know. So like you should be like the rough draft is a public history project, and so you should be like leading the viewer or the reader like through the controversy of like Dundas, you know. So like here's who he was, here's like why the towns or like roads were like named after him, like what here's like why it's controversial today. Like you're think of it this way, like you're telling a story of this controversy. So like does a bullet point like tell that story? Like no, but maybe like this paragraph describes like this part, and maybe this video like describes like this part, and so you're kind of putting all this together to tell the story of this controversy. Does that help make sense? Or does that kind of help kind of describe like how I see this going?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a good example, like in that workbook, I have like a story map of like one of my digital history, public history projects that I created, and like it's all prose, kind of laying out like how these floods happened, and like maps that sort of accompany it, right? But it is like a narrative, like you are telling the story of Dundas and why he's controversial.
It doesn't necessarily like need to be linear or chronological, does it? Like, can it just be like thematic, or does it need to like make sense chronologically?
No, it doesn't have to go in chronology, but it does have to have like a logic and an organization to it. You know, like the reader should be able to like look at this and be like, oh, I get it, and like clearly be able to like kind of follow along the points that you're trying to make. You know, so like a timeline obviously is like, you know, oh, I'm going like, oh, 1795, oh, now I'm in 1800, now 1830, like, you know, it already has that logic kind of built into it. If you're going to do something more thematic, like that's fine, but you just, you know, lead the viewer like through it. Yeah. But that's why we're doing this rough draft, so we can kind of like, you know, you can, you know, give me your project, and then we can again have these conversations. But the focus of the rough draft is really about narrative, storytelling, like kind of explaining this, you know, to the public. Like imagine this was not a classroom project or a class project, but this is something like you were trying to like deliver to your grandma or your cousin or something, you know. Like would bullet points like lay that out for them? Like probably not. Like you'd have to kind of explain it in a way, you know. Does that help clarify things, Duran? Or is there still confusion there? She's got the thumbs up. I see that. Okay, good. Duran, yes, that's more clear. Sorry, can you type it? Your internet keeps breaking up. Your connection keeps going in and out. There's a lot of days on your part. Meaning what? Oh, delays. Yes. Yeah. No problem. But do you with a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Do you understand the like clarification on like what the project should look like?
Yeah, it's really
Okay.
clear now.
Okay. Perfect. We got that. Okay. Any other questions or concerns then? No? Okay, so essentially what's going to happen then is I'm going to, as soon as we're done, I'll email you my written feedback, which basically kind of goes, like, we've already kind of discussed it, but just so you have it in writing. I'll post your mark, and then you are released, so to speak, to start working on your rough draft. I'm always available, though, if you have questions, concerns, worries. I'm available to meet. obviously. But again, like I would encourage you to really pick a tool and just kind of dive in and start working on it. That's my best advice for you going forward. I think you've done good work to this point, so just keep it up. So, clear?
Yeah.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, perfect. So, okay, good meeting with you again. I guess I'm looking forward to seeing your rough draft, and then we'll have another meeting after the rough draft in a few weeks. So work hard. Let me know if you have any questions, but otherwise, I guess we'll chat again in a few weeks.
Okay.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye.